It's Sunday morning. The confidence monitor's out. Both Chart Builder and Planning Center are offline, and even the printer at the church is out of ink. How can you lead worship? What are you going to do? In this video, I'm going to discuss the practical, technical, and spiritual reasons why I believe that memorizing music matters. Hey, my name is Brian Bolivar. I am the worship leader here at Rock Harbor Church, and I've been leading worship professionally for over a decade, and a few years past that as a volunteer. I've led over 1,000 services, and every single time I've done it from memory. And in this video, I want to walk you through 3 elements of why I do that and why I think you should do that. And if you stick around to the end of the video, I'll give you a bit of my personal testimony of why I actually do this. And if you want access to online courses and coaching for your worship and tech ministry, head over to churchfront.com and set up a free strategy call today. Now let's dive in. The first element is the chords. A lot of the modern worship songs, and even some of the not so modern worship songs, are written by people to be used at churches, meaning volunteers playing these songs week in and week out. So the songs are written to be easily played. So a few examples of songs that even have repeated chords are songs like Waymaker, which is the same pattern over and over again. Great Are You Lord, another example that's very simple songs. And more recent songs like Elevation's Trust in God, it's the same 4 chords over and over again for the entire song. So the songs are written to be simple and played by all levels of musicians. So that's why I always start with memorizing the chords first. So in my experience, one of the best ways to actually learn the chords is using the Nashville number systems. Now don't be afraid, I know that's a term that gets thrown around a lot because it's music theory, but really it's the most simplistic form of that. It's basically intervals. There's tons of videos about that kind of thing, but the Nashville numbers will allow you to look at a song and say, okay, I'm not really worried about if this song is an A, I'm not worried about the C sharp minor, I'm not worried about that stuff. I'm just simply going through the numbers. And since most of these songs are written so simply and for everyone to learn, the numbers are usually the same, the progressions are usually the same. So over and over again, if the song's in the key of G and the chords are G, D, E minor, and C, which is an extremely common progression, the numbers of that would be a 1, 5, 6, 4. The cool thing about the numbers is no matter where you play it key-wise, so you might show up Sunday morning, and hopefully this doesn't happen, but this is the story that we all use. You show up Sunday morning, and the worship leader is sick, and you're like, well, geez, I gotta lower the key. So if you're not in the numbers, you might be like, well, then I gotta relearn how to play the whole thing. But if you are in the numbers, you're saying, it doesn't matter what key you're in, the numbers stay the same. So for me, that's been the best way to actually learn how to memorize the chords. And the thing that's cool is the more you do this, you'll start noticing the patterns and you'll start to be able to anticipate the way that the songs move, because again, these songs are written simply for the church to learn. So you'll notice that, oh, that's going to go to the 4 chord. That's in the key of G. That's going to go to the C chord, or whatever the case may be. But it's an ear training technique. Start off with one song. Start off with your favorite song. Say, okay, I love, let's say Waymaker, because it's a repeated pattern. So I love Waymaker. The progression, no matter what key you're in, is going to be 4, 1, 5, 6. So repeated, literally the verses, the chorus, the turnaround, the bridge, all of it, same progression over and over again. So anybody could memorize that. So that's what I would suggest is when it comes to starting to learn how to memorize the chords, and working through the numbers system is a great ally in that pursuit, but just take it one song at a time. And with the chords, there are so many great tools like Chart Builder for multi-tracks and Planning Center and all these tools we already use, but the thing that's great is you're able to actually set up your charts to show you the numbers. So I'm sure by default it's the letters of the chords, but you can switch it to the numbers. So that way you can start to train your mind to learn. You can flip back and forth. So like for me, if I'm in Chart Builder, all of my charts are set to numbers. So as I'm practicing or whatever, I am going to just see what those are. And if I forget or whatever, I can always flip back to the chord letters to use as a reference. But there's so many tools out there to help us learn. But also as we learn and we take it slow, it gets easier and easier every time we do it. Element 2 are the lyrics. And just like with the chords, these songwriters that are providing these songs to the church that we all use and love week in and week out, they write these songs to be simple so that not only can the musicians play them, but the congregation can sing them. So my suggestion is start off with the repeated parts, which in most cases is the chorus. Although in some modern worship songs, Every part's the repeated part. But the simplest part is usually the chorus and or the bridge. So whenever it comes time for me to start to memorize a song, I'm gonna go to the chorus. For one, I may already know how the chorus goes, so it's not such a big deal to start taking that info in. But secondly, like I said, it's the repeated section. So I would always start with the chorus or bridge. So once I've got the chorus committed to memory, then I'll start usually with verse 1. And the way that I typically will do this is I will start with, the first line or two, I'll read it through on Chart Builder or whatever, and I'll kind of sing along with the song or read along with the song, and then I'll kind of pause the song and just take it one line at a time. Now this might seem tedious, but I find that it just becomes easier. And something with our minds is that I go in to the verse, then I step away from it. Maybe that's what I do for the day is I'll just work on that one verse. But then my brain has a way of kind of storing up that information. So when I approach it the following day, it's much easier to recall that. Of course, we can check and make sure and kind of going through that process. But taking it one step at a time, and I'm not trying to memorize a song on Sunday morning. This is something that I know what the set list is, and I might start the process, on a Monday leading up to a Thursday. But just like with the chords, just taking it one step at a time and being patient with yourself. And element number 3 is the spiritual side. Now, as we are learning these songs, whether it's the chords or the lyrics and or both, we're worshiping the entire time. These songs are worship songs written for God to sing and bring praise to the Lord. So that's sort of a really healthy benefit of doing this is we're committing these songs, similarly, not to say that all worship songs are psalms or hymns, some of them are, but the Psalms are a part of the Bible, and David was committing those things and speaking those things. So as we're doing this in these modern songs, we are worshiping the Lord. And with that, as we're working these things that we're putting in our minds and our hearts, and then we're bringing them out, we're not tied to the page telling us what comes next. Obviously, these are good tools and references. Confidence monitors exist for a reason. All these tools exist for a reason, and it's a great reference point. But when we're relying on these things, to me, it is getting in the way of the freedom we have to worship the Lord without having to wonder what is coming next. So an analogy I was thinking about when I was preparing for this was, as kids, when kids are learning how to paint, there's painting by numbers. So there's a picture and there's numbers, and it tells you, okay, at this number, put this color, or whatever the case may be. That's how we learn to paint. That's how we kind of get that idea. We're taking someone else's vision and we are implementing it in, and then we end up with a decently painted picture. But an experienced, matured artist is painting or drawing from experience, and from their mind rather than the guidelines of someone else. Of course, we're singing songs, so we have guidelines of the song, so it's not that. It's not like we're making every song our own. But that artist has freedom to create however they want because it's coming from within them. And I feel when we're leading from that position, we're singing, we're playing, we're drumming, we're mixing from that position, whatever the case is in our capacity in this ministry, that we can chase after God in a more unhindered way, because if I'm not worried about the next chord I'm going to play, then I can focus on the congregation, or I can focus on where God is leading me in that moment. Because there's plenty of times when we might go into spontaneous moments of worship where it might just be, playing the simple 4-bar chord loop, but then because, I'm not having to worry about what's coming next, I can maybe sing something that the Lord's given me in that moment. So I find freedom in the process. But of course, it all points back to preparation. If I hadn't spent the time doing this, preparing for this week or whatever, then I wouldn't be able to do that. So really, it all comes down to Sundays. And when we aren't hindered by being worried about what's coming next, then we can worship from a more freed position. And side note, if you're a songwriter like me, you're most likely playing songs from memory because they're coming from your heart. We have the same opportunity to do that, even if we haven't written the songs, because when we store up these songs in our mind, in our hearts, then we can present them in a way that we make them our own. Because, whether we've written a song or not, it's coming from within us as opposed to externally, then we have the opportunity to present it in that more authentic and vulnerable way. You know, there was the old debate of music stands or not, and I guess this is a similar idea. And all that being said, it comes down to your church culture, you know. But at the end of the day, my hope with this is to remove barriers between us hearing from God, leading from where God's leading us. We have an interesting capacity in the worship ministry is we are leading as we're being led by the Lord. So the less hindrances and the less things we have in the way of that will allow us to present whatever message we have through those songs in that way. You might think I'm only talking to vocalists here or, you know, people who play chords. I would say it's healthy for any person that's on the stage or in the back to have at least a working knowledge of the songs, because whatever our fingers are doing during worship, whether we're pushing faders, strumming chords or sticks or holding microphones, if we're all kind of in that same spiritual environment together where we all understand the message of the song, because by bringing it into our hearts and minds, that is there, you know, we can lead from that place. Because there's nothing better to be watching a worship team on stage and you'll see the guys or girls without the microphones singing along with the songs. Now, sure, they might be reading off the screens. That's totally their call. But either way, it's such an engaging environment when everyone's in one accord, literally. And I would say be easy on yourself. Just like with the chords, take it one song at a time. Don't think you need to memorize every worship song for the set this week. You know, we often repeat songs over and over again in our worship ministries. So take your favorite one. Take that Waymaker example. Whatever the song is, your heart song, and commit it to memory and go from there. And then every time you do it, you'll start to kind of learn and you'll take more and more liberties. Honestly, it will become easier because your mind will learn and soak up the information better. I mean, I don't know, I watch a lot of YouTube videos and stuff on musicians, and I'll see these like elderly people that are like jazz guitarists, and those people are super quick-witted. So I have to believe that God's wired our minds to stay sharp as we are kind of making those musical connections. So there's that scientific aspect of it too. So then I promised at the beginning of the video that I would explain why, my personal testimony of why I do all of this memorizing, because you're just like, why don't you just read off the screen? Isn't it easier? I agree, it is easier. But, so I have a visual impairment called macular degeneration. It's called Stargardt's, which is the childhood onset of that, which basically means I don't have any central vision. So I have peripheral vision, which, long story short, I can't read regular print paper. I can't read a confidence monitor. I can't actually read the iPad or any of those cool tools that are available. So basically I have to memorize and able to lead worship. And so, like I mentioned in the beginning, you know, I've calculated I've led over 1,000 worship services, and every one of those is from memory because that's the way that I have to do it. But at the same time, I was brought in, you know, 10 years ago when I was offered my first worship leading position, I had to memorize then too. And I still got offered the job, and you know, still doing this a decade later. So you could say, well, maybe they just like the way you sang, or they like the way you played. That may be true, or maybe because of the way that I have to do this, and I have to memorize and commit it to memory, and the way that comes out of me allows me to worship in a freedom that some people don't get to experience. So I understand that my circumstances cause me to have to memorize things, but at the same time, I don't know if I would change it if I had to, because I know that when I'm leading every week and these songs are coming out of me, and let me say that I certainly don't get the words right every time. And you know, a lot of services, there's times where the words just aren't there. And that's okay too, because God loves us whether we get every chord and every lyric and every drum hit right. But my challenge is to take it slow, let God speak to you, because like I said, the spiritual aspect of this I feel like is the most powerful part of it, because we are worshiping Him as we are learning these songs. So then that preparation time, that personal preparation time, that when we bring that to Sunday mornings, God will use that. One of my life verses is 2 Corinthians 12:9, and paraphrasing it, basically is the one that God says, His power is made perfect in our weaknesses. Now, in my case, maybe in your case, I have more of a obvious weakness, but the reality is we all have weaknesses. That's what the verse says to me. We all have weaknesses. Otherwise, His power could not be made perfect through them. So whatever situation that you're in, God will make it work, because if I couldn't memorize songs, which anybody could, but if I couldn't do it, then I couldn't be doing what I'm doing. So God will show up in all of those areas. So I would encourage you to take it slow and let God work through that. And that's why I'm a firm believer that memorizing music matters. Thanks so much for watching this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe this video. And for more resources for your tech and worship team, head over to churchfront.com, and I'll see you on the next video.